Hello, everyone. It is Ty Walden here with Patrick Chiotti from PFN. Patrick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on. Yesterday was full of food and desserts, so glad to be talking football.
Yes. Well, especially with it being Turkey Day, now we got to talk about more football.
Yep, yep.
Um, but last week was a pretty good game between the Broncos and the Dolphins. It was definitely a much needed win. As far as the game itself, what stood out to you?
I think the biggest thing that stood out to me was the defensive front really stepping it up. With all the guys that they had out, and the guys that we have out from injuries. Shelby Harris didn't play in that game. Jarrell Casey obviously out for the year. Mike Purcell is out for some time. So the fact that we were able to have guys like Draymond Jones, Demarcus Walker, McTelvin Ajim step in, Deshaun Williams having a huge game. That's really what stood out to me. Just creating that pressure, getting those 6 sacks on Tua, forcing Ryan Fitzpatrick to come to the game and kind of try to save the day. That's really what stood out to me. All the stuff on the offensive side of the ball. We can talk about Drew's big game. Against one of the better defensive units in the league, but the biggest thing for me was just creating the pressure because that's something that is just so important in today's football. You got to be able to create pressure up front and get to the quarterback and force them to make rash decisions and quick decisions, which lead to turnovers and things like that.
Yeah, and especially kind of helps, I guess, in a sense when it's you're going up against a rookie quarterback who's only making his fourth start, and
Yep.
and on a little bit on that rookie part. I know this isn't related to the Broncos at all, but Tua got yanked from the game. Do you think it was? They said it was injury. They said it was performance. What do you
Yeah.
think that does for a quarterback to be? We ended up. It was like due to performance. Do you
Yeah.
think that's going to shoot his confidence at all, or?
I think for a guy like Tua who really has, coming out of Alabama, he's got these high expectations. Everybody was really expecting him to be QB1 last year. Obviously, Burrow came out of nowhere. Justin Herbert, he really has kind of shocked people around the league. But I think with these expectations, it would shake a young quarterback's confidence. You're not performing well against a defensive front that is missing a bunch of guys. You're not making your reads correctly. You're not getting the ball out quick enough. And for a guy who has been touted as this quarterback that has such a quick release, he really looked to struggle. But in the end, I think that Tua is going to be okay as far as confidence goes. There was a snippet that was going around social media of Ryan Fitzpatrick talking to him on the sideline, and really kind of being that veteran mentor to Tua, saying, everybody has a rough day. This is a learning experience. And this is going to be an opportunity for Tua to look at this tape and go through it and say, here's what I did wrong. Here's what I could have been here's what I could have done differently, and just go to the next week and take those things that you learned from the Denver loss, take it into the next week and kind of progress from there. You really have to take it 1 week at a time, and especially for a rookie quarterback in the NFL, every week in your first season is a learning experience. I mean, look back at Drew Lock's last 5 games last year. Every game was a learning experience. And we look at the KC game from last year. He had to come away from that game with a lot of learning experiences, playing in adverse weather, playing against a team that eventually won a Super Bowl. So I think with rookie quarterbacks, it could be easy to shake their confidence, but Tua is very lucky to have a great coach in Brian Flores and a great veteran mentor in Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yes, definitely. I'm hoping that unless Tua's playing us, that he does succeed in the NFL.
Yeah, I think everybody wants him to succeed. People that want players to do bad in the NFL, it baffles me. But I think that he is a very talented individual. I think that there's a lot of physical traits that he has that, will make him a successful quarterback in the NFL for a long time. It's just about putting them together. And they'll do more to surround him with better talent. Obviously they have some good pieces in Mike Gesicki and Devontae Parker, and they do have to rebuild that offensive line. But I think down the road they're going to do more to build around him. So I think his future is bright. I think it's just about changing those little things, and like I said, taking it week by week and getting better each week. You get better off the field, and on the field product is what we see from watching tape, practice reps, and being in the weight room.
Yeah, hopefully it helps out and he can. Oh, I already said that he'd be successful
Yeah.
already.
No, he will be. He will be.
Yeah. One thing that I find that helps a quarterback be successful is having a solid run game. Now, referencing that to the Broncos,
Yeah.
they appear to do better when they're running the football. But why do you think it's been so difficult for this offense to be more consistent running the football?
Well, it really, I think it comes down to a couple of things. Stemming back from the Atlanta game, not giving Philip Lindsay enough carries, really not splitting those reps enough. I think that Melvin Gordon is a fine back. I think he's done particularly well in Denver, but we all know that Philip Lindsay is the best back in the running back room. And when you're not giving the ball to your playmakers, you're not going to be successful on offense. You have to have that continuity week by week. Going from 12 to 15 carries down to 4 and then back up to 15, that it's just not a good game plan. We've all seen what can happen when we give Philip Lindsay the ball. Keep that going. The other part is I think that they were doing too much zone block schemes or gap block schemes. It really, what we saw against Miami was a lot of power schemes, a lot of counters, a lot of the wide pulling of the tackle and the guard from the opposite side. Those schemes work. Going back to last year, watching a lot of that tape, Philip Lindsay was fantastic when they were running counter all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we ran counter, Philip Lindsay got a huge gain. And it's just because he's able to see those holes develop, and he is patient enough, and his burst through the hole is just fantastic. So I think switching from that kind of gap and zone scheme to more of a power run game is really beneficial for both Philip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon. That's what Melvin Gordon ran at Wisconsin. That's where he was successful. The running power, running counter, running trap, all those power run schemes that a patient running back can have, that time to wait and let that hole develop and then burst through the hole. We saw it on Melvin's on the 20-yard touchdown run by Melvin. He went untouched. And that was just a result of him being patient, seeing the hole and hitting it. So I think really the inconsistency of the scheme, and then the inconsistency of using your featured back is what was hounding the run game for those few weeks. So it was good to see them get back to it against Miami. Hopefully they can continue it this week and going forward, because that's really going to be the catalyst. We talk about the run game helping the quarterback. Look at how Drew Lock was. Look at how he was playing against a good Miami defense when the run game was working. He was able to be a lot more confident, he looked a lot more comfortable, and he was hitting those throws over the middle. Obviously, the early interception was just a bad read, but he bounced back from it very well. And hopefully they can keep the run game going so that he can be more comfortable in himself.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I do want to point out, how much sense do you believe it would make if Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay, for maybe a couple plays during the game, were on the field at the same time? Would it help as far as what the defense, them not being able to know where to go? I just want to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw that week 1 against Tennessee, and then I believe the first game that Phil was back, Pat Shermer did the same thing, having both Philip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon in the backfield at the same time, and it worked wonders. Those few plays that they did, Philip Lindsay had receiving opportunities, and we talked a lot about him getting more opportunities in the passing game. Obviously, Melvin Gordon, one of the biggest reasons he was brought in was because he was a decent receiver out of the backfield. So I think having both of them on the field at the same time, it can be very beneficial. Pat Shermer really likes to run. I just thinking off the top of my head, he really likes to run this one specific play. And we see Andy Reid run it a lot, and a lot of those guys from the Andy Reid tree, where they have the play fake going to the left, the other back comes over the top to the right, and the quarterback rolls out to the right, and it's either dump off to the running back for a good gain, or he's got a receiver or tight end dragging across the other side. We could see that with Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay, but I do think it would be beneficial to have both of them out there at the same time. They're both competitive guys. They both want the ball, obviously. But I think the more weapons that you put on the field for Drew Lock, the more successful we're going to see him be.
I just really hope that we can do that and get it going, because I'm so I'm so tired of being predictable on offense.
Absolutely, and that's really been one of the toughest things to watch over the last month or so. Is just especially on the first drives, you can almost telegraph what play they're going to run based on their formation, based on the personnel, and it's just when you're an offensive play caller, you really have to have that variety. Especially when you have so many weapons. Obviously Cortland Sutton's not out there, so it's tough to have that number one guy. But when you have the weapons like KJ Hamler and even utilizing Nick Vanette in certain ways, like we did see this last weekend, I think that putting all the weapons that you have and really giving defenses a different look out of those similar formations that you run, it can be beneficial. But the first drive is so crucial to an offense's success. We cannot continue to go 3 and out or have turnovers on the very first drive, because that's a crushing blow. The defense hates that stuff. You have to be able to get a good drive going on your first drive, because that's what builds tempo for the game.
Oh, definitely, without question. Hopefully we can stop doing that and we can actually get things going. But I want to get this one's a little bit of a fun question. And I ask this question for almost every new person I interview. But how did your love for the Denver Broncos begin?
Oh man, it started as a young kid, man. The first football game that I ever watched was the Broncos and Packers Super Bowl, and seeing John Elway in the helicopter play, that was what solidified it. I was about, oh God, I was about 7 years old at the time, and didn't really know much about football at that point, but seeing that play on television, that was like, I want to be like that guy. I want to be like John Elway when I grow up. Little did I know that he was an old man at the time.
Right.
But that's really what started it. And I have a lot of family out in Colorado, and specifically around Denver. So growing up, it was always Broncos stuff. First Broncos game that I ever went to was actually Christmas Eve. I think 2000, it was either 2005 or 2006, against the Bengals, and it was the game. John Lynch blocked it would have been the game tying PAT.
Right.
It was dumping snow. It was about 60 degrees at kickoff. And then by halftime, it was dumping snow and typical Denver weather. But that was the first experience of mine that I had that was like the Mile High magic and the roar of the crowd and everything like that. So it started as a kid and it just kind of grew very much over the years.
Awesome. I think that's you and I are kind of similar in that sense because the Broncos Packers was my first game that I watched as
Ah,
well.
classic.
Yeah, can't beat the classics.
No, no, not at all.
So this week is going to be a little tough because we're going against New Orleans Saints. It
Hmm.
might be a little bit more on the simpler side because it's not Drew Brees we're going up against; it's Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
But either way you either way you put it, what's it going to take to win this game?
Man, this is going to be a tough game, and it's really going to be a tougher game, I think, for the offense. This is a New Orleans team that is really kind of one of the more undersung defensive units in the league. I believe they're the eighth ranked offense or eighth ranked defense, second ranked run defense in the NFL. So being able to get the run game going is going to be crucial. But as far as going up against a guy like Taysom Hill, I was thinking to myself this week, and I was really trying to kind of analyze what kind of player Taysom Hill was, and it's really tough because he's not, he's not like every other quarterback in the league, and I'm not trying to sit here and say that he's, a god or anything like that, but really looking at it, I was thinking to myself, what if they what if they had a similar game plan to the one that they had against New England, where it was because when New Orleans played last week in Taysom Hill's first start, they ran a lot of QB power, really trying to open up that run game for him, to utilize that to kind of get the defense to play up a little bit. So I'm wondering maybe if they, utilize that game plan that they used against New England. On the flip side, you do have good receivers in Mike Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders and these other sneaky good receivers for New Orleans. So you kind of really have to play disciplined. I think on the defensive side of the ball, more blitzes, getting more, keeping that pressure going up front, because that offensive line does have some weaknesses. So I think taking advantage of those, just putting pressure on Taysom Hill, forcing him to make bad decisions, forcing him to make bad throws, and letting Justin Simmons kind of roam back there. I think a lot of it is going to be short stuff, over the middle stuff. It's not really going to be, the deep bombs that we're used to seeing. So I think that this defense just needs to play very disciplined. Be respectful of the run game. Alvin Kamara is a big weapon. Latavius Murray has been running extremely well this season as well. So you got a bunch of weapons on that side of the ball, but the offense has to be able to sustain drives against this defense. This is going to be a very tough game for Drew Lock, I think. Especially with going up against Cam Jordan, wherever he lines up, you got to be able to watch that. And if he's coming through the interior, Cushenberry is going to have a tough day. Reisner is going to have a tough day. And if Glasgow's healthy, he's going to have a tough day too. Cam Jordan is an absolute monster, but I think that just getting the run game going and then building the pass game off of that, they have two extremely good corners as well in Janoris Jenkins and Marshawn Lattimore. So it'll be a tough matchup. I'm excited to see which corner goes up against which Broncos receiver. I would love to see Marshawn Lattimore go up against Jerry Jeudy. Honestly, I think that would be the matchup. He'll probably be on Tim Patrick a lot, but this all goes back to what we were talking about earlier with getting that first drive going. Use KJ Hamler on the end arounds. Use him on the fly sweeps. Get him involved because that's going to take more pressure off of Tim Patrick and Jerry Jeudy to have to make big plays. And then attack that defense with your secondary guys. Use the running backs in the passing game. Find Noah Fant, find Nick Van get those guys involved as well, because all that is going to take pressure off of Drew Lock.
It's a very detailed preview of that game for sure. I do have one question about Taysom Hill.
Sure.
We know when he came to New Orleans, he was more of like I describe him as like a jack of all trades player because he had the, I was surprised when I first heard he had started off as a kick returner,
Hmm.
which really threw me off a little bit. And then we've seen him play running back, we've seen him be wide receiver, we've seen him play tight end.
Yep.
As far I have a feeling they could do some of those gadget plays, but as far as Taysom Hill, the quarterback, do you I kind of like what you said about being prepared for the short passes because I don't remember hearing Taysom Hill having that strong of an arm to throw a deep ball.
Yeah, no, I mean his deep ball isn't it's not the it's not the best. He does have a pretty decent arm, but really when you're talking about him as the starting quarterback, this is that game plan where you kind of go away from having him to take those deep shots, because a lot of those deep shots that he was taking was off of sweeps, off of like a flea flicker type play.
Mhm.
So he's throwing to a wide open guy. He's not having to read a coverage and then make a deep throw. um, so I do expect it to be more intermediate passes, short passes, screen passes. um, he kind of it's so funny, man. Like he's pretty much the player that like everybody wanted Tim Tebow to be. Like he's big enough and can run the ball well enough to be a running back. He has good enough hands to where he can play tight end or be a split out receiver. He's got a decent enough arm and enough accuracy to be a quarterback. He's just an all around athlete, man. And it really comes down to him as the starting quarterback. You have to look at what he can do and his responsibilities in reading coverage. So I don't really believe there's going to be a whole lot of deep throws. If they are, it's going to be off of like wheel routes and pick routes and things like that. But I'm not really expecting a whole bunch of 50-yard bombs from him. Maybe like some 15 to in the 15 to 25 range, but anything higher than that, it'll kind of be like one of those, like a 40-60 ball is what I would call it for Justin Simmons.
There you go.
Yeah.
I would. That's actually a really good comparison because I do see a lot of Tim Tebow inside of Taysom Hill. So
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, Tim Tebow paved the way for guys like him. I mean, we're seeing it kind of develop into this, um, this kind of trend in the NFL where you have a guy who really can do it all on every team. I don't know who the gadget guy would be for the Denver Broncos. I think it would be Cortland Sutton, considering how he threw the ball against Minnesota last year. But
yep.
you know, it seems like every team has one guy that can kind of do a little bit of everything.
Oh yeah. Speaking of Broncos players, is there one that you have your eye on that should hopefully play a big impact in Sunday's game?
Ooh, that's a good question. Because there's a lot. I mean, after last week, I think Justin Simmons is playing at a great at a great level right now. Um, I think that he's a guy that you can keep your eye on. But really, for me, man. Oh, I think it's honestly, you know what? I'm just gonna go with it. I'm gonna say Drew Lock. I'm gonna say Drew Lock because this is going to be a telling game. Last week was, like I've said, against one of the better secondaries in the league. This week you're going against one of the better overall defenses in the league, a top 10 defense. So I want to see how his confidence from last week comes into this week. I want to see if he can execute the game plan the way that it needs to be executed. Get up to the line of scrimmage, make your reads, make your calls, learn from what you did wrong last week, and use it this week against one of the best defenses in the NFL. Because if you're looking for any way to shut up the haters, if you're looking for any way to prove it to the guys that have been casting doubt, this is the week. This is
Oh
the
yeah.
week. We have a lot of tough games coming up. We have Kansas City coming up. We have to play the Raiders one more time. We have to play the Bills one more time. That's going to be a game where the Lock and Josh Allen comparisons are going to be running crazy.
Oh,
But this week is going to be a season-defining game for Drew Lock. He has to come out and put together some consistent drives. If they end in field goals, they end in field goals. That's fine. But at least get into field goal range. We cannot
Right.
have 3-and-outs. We cannot have punts. We have to put points on the board. And it's his job to make sure that the ball gets to where it needs to go. If you got it, I mean, you have to do everything to make sure that you win this game, because this is going to be one of those career defining, season defining games for Drew Lock. So he's the guy that I have my eye on this week. There's a few other guys, Bradley Chubb, Justin Simmons. We can talk about those guys. Those guys are, all pro level players, but Drew Lock is the guy who has the most question marks around him right now. And even after winning a game against Miami last week, there's still question marks around him. So he has to come out this week and prove that he can put together 2 great games in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Last week was a great game. It wasn't flashy. He didn't put up huge numbers, but he got the job done.
Right.
So put together 2 great games in a row against 2 good defenses, and then we can start to talk about maybe quarterback is off the plate next year for the draft.
I hope so. Let's see if we can maybe get a Houston Texans kind of game from him for this one.
I would love to see that. I want to see some more. I want to see some more Buzz Lock here. That's really what we need to see. I feel like we haven't really seen that that same Drew Lock from last season. Just looking at his body language during this year, obviously it's frustrating taking sacks and making bad throws. But a lot of that is self-inflicted wounds, and you gotta learn to pick yourself up, and you gotta learn to get back on the horse, because one of the biggest pluses about him coming out of Missouri was his confidence in himself. Nick Kendall famously posted that piece of him from his pro day saying that he's very confident in himself, and that he would bet on himself all the time. Where has that Drew Lock been? Where's the guy? Obviously Colin Cowherd doesn't like to see him dancing, but where's the guy that's putting on the backpack and getting the bag and celebrating with his teammates? It doesn't really seem like his energy level has been there. So
Right.
I think that this would be a great game to see him get back to form, and kind of put the doubters at bay for another week.
Yes. Well, all he needs to do is go on the sideline and throw a Gatorade to the side, and he should be good to go.
Seriously, maybe wrap a little Jeezy.
There you go. Well, Patrick, I want to thank you for taking the time out to chat with me.
Of course, man.
Where can the social people who are on social media find you for your latest work?
So you can find a lot of my work at Pro Football Network. That's at PFN 365. You can follow me on Twitter at Patrick Chiotti. That's at PatrickChiotti. You can find my Denver Broncos and food hot takes on Twitter. So it seems like the best time of year for all that.
Oh, that is true. That is very true. I know Cameron has had you on his podcast quite a bit, so definitely probably see you there a couple times as well.
Oh yeah. You can find me on the Mainly Broncos podcast. I'll hop on the Locked On show with Cody Rourke at times too. So
nice.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, man.